We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Line Movement. So excited to talk trade targets on this show each and every week with my next guest. He's the co-owner of footballguys.com. Sigmund Bloom, welcome back to the program, man. You have been hot with the trade target videos. I know these have been some of the more popular ones on the channel, so always happy to have you back with us. How was your week 6?
It was okay. I
Yeah.
think that week 6 was, it was Derrick Henry's week, right? I mean,
Right.
and Justin Jefferson. It was the kind of week where there were enough touchdowns that went by the wayside, enough games that got out of hand that we didn't get a lot of the results that we were looking for. But that's what makes it beautiful when you did take Derrick Henry third or fourth, or you did stick with Justin Jefferson, even when the first few weeks it looked like he wasn't going to play a big role. So we like it when fantasy will reward conviction.
Yeah, we're gonna bring that each and every week for sure. Sig, like even like the last couple of weeks, like you talked us into, I guess, trying to acquire Joe Mixon before his big game. You I think the week before that, you had us on Michael Gallup when it was kind of a revolving door. Is it Lamb? Is it Gallup? So that was great. Last week you were like, don't be too worried about Lamar Jackson if he's someone that people are a little bit down on because he ran twice the week before. And then he just gives us a 100-yard rushing game to boot last week. So love to see that overall. I'll say this. I feel like I give you like my DFS recap every week. So basically, Mike Davis versus Derrick Henry was the difference between a lot for me. So we actually had someone that plays high stakes on come on our show last night. Peter Jennings he plays like close to 50 grand a week in entry fees, but he cleared like 300K with the same lineup I had, except for he had Derrick Henry, I had Mike Davis. So that was tough overall. I guess the Derrick Henry thing, he's just so fun to watch overall. He just makes football. We talked about Fitzpatrick last week of just like making football more enjoyable. I think you have to put Derrick Henry in that category, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if there's a takeaway, it's always try to get players in your lineup that are facing Houston, and generally avoid players that are facing Chicago or Tampa Bay. It looks like those are two of the truly legit defenses. And I just want to take a moment because I know you're going to appreciate this, but this morning you wake up to find out Doc Emmerich is going to retire.
I saw that.
That is nobody, and I mean nobody, brought their sport to life for people. Like when we go to the afterlife or the next plane or whatever it is, Joe, if there's something like hockey, Doc Emmerich will be calling it.
That's true. You literally, you think about hockey, you think of that voice, and there's like a ton of like, you can't say that about every sport, I don't think, also, because there's guys that we like to rag on in football or whatever it is, but like you won't find one person that doesn't like Doc Emmerich or think that he's extremely talented. So it's a bummer for the hockey world in general, man. I'm glad you brought that up.
It is, but at the same time, it's a chance to look back over 40 years, especially over recent years, where just the joy and enthusiasm and excitement, and he just operated as another suction to pull you into the game and get caught up in it because he was caught up in it.
You're right there. So I guess in terms of just kind of trying to bring everyone into the fantasy world, to the trade targets world, but also I'm sure there's some guys in here that you're not super bullish on overall. So we mentioned that Tampa Bay matchup before. So it sounds like you're not too scared off of a guy like Aaron Jones, at least long-term, short-term. Is he a guy that you're trading for after that performance against Tampa Bay? I mean, not a lot of people have gotten much done against Tampa Bay, so.
Exactly. So this is going to be a more positive. There's not too fades. I don't know if I gave you any fades this week.
Okay.
But I think again we're looking at psychology and we're trying to get a pause. And another factor here, maybe not looking quite so far ahead to the fantasy playoffs, although we'll talk about that in upcoming weeks. But now, Joe, 6 weeks in, we have good data and our eyes too to tell us where the tough matchups are. This is the theme that just naturally presented itself, right? And then we can look at the schedule and we can really have an idea of which players are set for takeoff. And if you look at Aaron Jones, who really is, short of maybe Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, as valuable as any running back, I don't know that people are thinking of him that way. I don't know if people are thinking of him as, say, a top 6, top 7 pick in fantasy drafts, but that's what he would be if we were drafting today. And you look at the Green Bay schedule, Houston, what did we just say? Start players against Houston, Minnesota, San Francisco, Jacksonville, Indianapolis. Those next 5 games, he is due for another 3 or 4 touchdown game. He is a player that when he gets hot, I think that you're going to see also the Packers with that soft showing against Tampa Bay. One of the ways that you get the physicality of your team up is get that running game going, which is what Matt LaFleur wanted to build offense around anyway. So I think that this is just maybe a pause because Aaron Jones hasn't had one of those big games and got thwarted so easily in a high visibility game last week that maybe he's available for cheaper than he should be.
I love this, like literally that last point that you made about the psychology of like being in primetime games or being in a game that everyone's watching, just because like if they fail in that spot, like there's just so much recency bias in DFS and season long and betting in general that I think that those are the situations that we have to try and take advantage of. So I'm with you on Aaron Jones, especially in this spot coming up, just the prime bounce back spot overall. I think that it's always going to be a guy that is going to be extremely active at the goal line, which is obviously positive. I struggle a little bit sometimes with Aaron Jones because you can't project him for like the crazy amounts of volume that you can for some of these other guys, but he's talented and efficient enough. We've seen that over a large sample now that I think that Aaron Jones is still someone that can get there on like his 18 to 19 touches some weeks versus some guys that really need their 22, 23 to get there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really sharp. I guess another guy that probably needs more touches to get there, at least some of them that we've seen so far this year, Jonathan Taylor. But even before you touch on this, Sig, the one thing that I was really, I guess, encouraged by is that he was much more active in the passing game in week 6. And that's truly what we've kind of been missing. So what are your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor as a trade target?
Going into the bye for Indianapolis, and what you hope is maybe his team is 2-4 or 1-5, and they really need somebody for week 7 to take his spot, and maybe you can give it a discount. Because again, looking at the schedule, coming out of the bye, Detroit, very good. Baltimore, okay, not necessarily an ideal matchup. And then Tennessee, Green Bay, Tennessee, Houston, Las Vegas, and Houston. And those are all games, I think, where he should get a chance to really get going, maybe break off some of those long runs that we saw at Wisconsin that we haven't seen yet. And otherwise, just like Derrick Henry, as we get deeper into the season, that should be Jonathan Taylor's time of year. So I think, again, this is a time to check. And he's been modestly successful for fantasy football, but nowhere near what folks expected when Marlon Mack went down. So, again, always keeping those context factors in mind. What's the team's record? What's their lineup look like this week? Is there maybe another throw-in you could give them to help them in another position? You might be able to pry Taylor away.
I like that, especially because honestly, it comes down to sometimes just like targeting a running back for a defense that could be elite. Like, that the game script could be in his favor going forward. So I love the Jonathan Taylor call. I think one conversation that we had just in the chat earlier today was trying to trade for guys before they come back from injury. If you can get any sort of discount is a big part of kind of these middle weeks as we approach the fantasy playoffs. So Nick Chubb, are you interested in Nick Chubb in terms of like trying to trade for him even before he's back fully healthy?
Yeah, and this could be an Austin Eckler take.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a Christian McCaffrey take, although McCaffrey, I think, is if you were going to get McCaffrey probably right when he got injured was the time.
Agreed.
And again, I mean, maybe if a team is 1-5 or 0-6 and they just realize it's not going to happen with McCaffrey, but again, check all those context clues with the team. But let's focus in on Chubb just for this reason. Unlike McCaffrey, there hasn't really been discussion of when he's going to come back yet. I think that based on his injury, since he did not have surgery, that we really should expect him back after the bye, which would be week 10. And he comes back to face Houston, Philadelphia, Jacksonville, Tennessee, and then Baltimore, the Giants, and the Jets. And I love that Giants and Jets combination in week 15 and 16 because those feel like games where Cleveland's going to be able to put the lean on them. And again, it's going to be his time of year. And if there's a good thing to come out of Nick Chubb's knee injury, it's that he hasn't sustained the wear and tear that he would because he takes a lot of punishment. He gives out a lot of punishment too. So I think that this reminds me, by the way, Jeremy McNichols is a name to just file away in the back of your head just because as much as we love Derrick Henry, everybody is injury open. No, and I feel, Joe, everything's so Freudian and laden with extra meaning now because I want to say no one is immune from injuries.
Yeah,
but this 2020,
this is the
guy.
guy.
You don't want to say that.
Yeah.
So again, we're thinking about if there's a theme that you should be seeing emerging here. It's that we have a handle on the schedule and whether it looks like it's going to be an uphill climb or easy sailing for some of these teams. And we also know that as we get deeper into the season, the brand of football changes, and these big, powerful running backs become that much more important. Someone just told Derrick Henry it was December, even though it was only October.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been. It's well documented my Derrick Henry, I guess, struggles overall because I personally struggle in like a site like DraftKings, a full PPR site, paying up for a guy that isn't that active in the passing game, and then literally Derrick Henry just buries me with these 90-yard runs. Like it's happened plenty of times. I think that overall, he's a fun guy to watch for sure. I agree that Nick Chubb is one of those guys that it might actually benefit him to have a little bit less wear and tear. We know this team wants to run a ton, so I love that call, Sig. I always want to get your take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it sounds like Ben Roethlisberger, if you're streaming quarterbacks, if you're trying to trade for someone, still, as we're approaching the fantasy playoffs, like it's never too early to be talking about this sort of stuff.
No. And look, he had a disappointing result yesterday, even though they rolled over Cleveland. I mean, in part because they rolled over Cleveland. Chase Claypool caught 2 balls inside the 5. These are all those DFS tilts that will keep you up at night, right?
I know them well.
He caught 2 balls inside the 5, but here's the thing. When you get Roethlisberger, you have 2 factors coming together here. One is that I think you're going to get all 4 of these receivers on the field, and that's with Chase Claypool really spreading his wings. The other is the schedule again. Tennessee, we saw last week, and these are all things to keep in mind for DFS too, because we saw last week Will Fuller was a good play, Brandon Cooks was a good play, Darren Fells was a good play. All that connects at the quarterback. Yes, Baltimore isn't an ideal matchup, but then after that, Dallas, Cincinnati, Jacksonville. These are games that tell me that Ben Roethlisberger, he always has the possibility of that 4 or 5 touchdown game in him, as long as these teams don't just roll over the way that Cleveland did. You also still have a matchup with Washington, with Buffalo, another matchup with Cincinnati in the fantasy playoffs. So other than those Baltimore matchups, I don't see much resistance against a passing game that has a wide receiver 1 to 4 rotation that I don't think any other team can match right now.
I think there's some unique situations around the league where maybe you can look past like an elite defense on the other side, because like that in theory should limit the ceiling for Roethlisberger. But like you said, if he gets all of these weapons healthy, the ceiling is going to take care of itself. You would imagine they're going to have a couple games down the stretch here where they just go completely nuclear and it doesn't matter what they have on defense. So I'm with you on that one. I guess it's a great transition, Sig, this last person on your list. Another team that just doesn't always have to have their foot on the pedal. So Hollywood Brown, I just have such a soft spot for this guy because he's always someone that like kind of in the data looks really strong, but just the volume hasn't quite been there because that hasn't needed to be at times. So what do you think about Hollywood Brown as a trade target?
Yeah, that's it. Unlike Lamar Jackson, where we really needed to get in before the next blow up game happened, we can take our time with Hollywood Brown, and he's another player on a bye. And just in general, I think this is also a good reminder. We already talked about Jonathan Taylor. Maybe there's somebody you like, maybe Preston Williams or Ryan Fitzpatrick is super cheap. Minnesota, if you wanted to go after, say, Dalvin Cook, where we have these 2 things intersecting, trading for players on their bye and trading for injured players. This is a good time to hit up these other teams and see the spot that they're in here. But with Marquis Brown, I think that, as we talked about with Lamar Jackson, you just need more competitive games. You just need games where Lamar Jackson's going to have to air it out more, where Marquis Brown is going to get an opportunity. And the first one right out of the bye is going to be Pittsburgh. But then there's Indianapolis, New England, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and Dallas. Those are 6 games that all sound like they're going to be competitive games, and games where they don't necessarily have to put the passing game on mothballs in the second half. So I think those are games that project as better passing games than running games as far as what's going to really work for the defense. So I would be really excited, again, coming right out of gate against the Steelers. And what do we know about the Steelers? If the pass rush doesn't get home, somebody's open. And it didn't work out last week, I think, because Baker Mayfield wasn't healthy. And maybe it wouldn't have mattered even if Mayfield was healthy. But I think against Lamar Jackson, extending some plays, I look forward to seeing how Lamar Jackson attacks the Tennessee defense. I look forward to seeing how he attacks the New England defense. I think that with his ability to keep plays alive and Marquise Brown's speed, we're headed towards one of those 152 touchdown games in one of those weeks.
If you're here for the first time, do me a favor, toss a like on this video. If you're listening to it on the podcast, would love it if you give me a rating and review. Really trying to build up the podcast as well as we're on this YouTube journey. Let me know in the comments what you think your, I guess, top trade target is, but also some that you're debating going into week 7. Sigmund Bloom, though, I always want to make this very clear, which is nice because line movement, we don't have a subscription. We talked about this a little bit, Sig. So I'm able to truly promote some of the people that I think are doing really good work, and footballguys.com. Like, they've been there since the very beginning of my fantasy journey. So appreciate you, Sig. And I know that you guys are doing a lot of great stuff over there. So any final plugs, and then we'll get you out of here.
Just chugging away with the season and all of our tools, DFS, IDP, Dynasty, everything you could imagine. Spending way too much time thinking about fantasy football, which is probably a lot of the people listening right now. And you didn't tell me that this spot was going to take away from watching a game when we scheduled it.
I know. I actually didn't even realize that. So let's get out of here. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this video today. Sig, good luck in week 7. We'll see you very soon, my friend.